Having someone else around during family time is just a nuisance.
It was my sister-in-law, Helen, who said that. For some reason, she shoved me into the yard.
Ouch! What are you doing?
Thrown off balance by her force, I fell off the porch and slammed into the snow-covered ground.
Useless people should just freeze in the yard. Take a moment to reflect on your thick nerves.
Spitting out those mocking words, she cackled and disappeared into the living room. Once I safely made it back inside, I headed towards the family room to join everyone. When I stepped inside, what greeted me was Helen's sloppy appearance. She was snoring, lying on her back on the sofa with a vodka bottle in one hand. The sight was so pitiful that a sigh escaped from my entire body.
Helen, wake up.
Her husband, Greg, spoke with a cold expression, shaking her with a tone I had never heard before.
What is it? I was sleeping so well.
Grumbling, Helen sat up, scratching her head and glaring at Greg.
Helen, we need to talk.
Talk? Does it have to be right now? I've got a headache.
Her attitude made it clear she found this whole thing a bother, but Greg silently slapped a piece of paper down in front of her.
What's this?
Greg slammed something onto the table.
Hannah, I'm sorry to ask, but could you take this over to the neighbor's house?
Oh no. Mom, you don't need to carry that. I'll do it.
Don't worry about it. I'm still strong, you know.
That's true. We need you to stay healthy. But please be careful, okay? If you weren't around, I'd be so lonely. I might end up complaining to Dad every day.
Yeah, you're so right.
Did you say something?
No, not really. I'm going to get this delivered now.
I'm Hannah Sanders, 50 years old. I am married to a banker and reside with my in-law in their house. I told them I wanted to stay close since my husband frequently relocates for work. They are truly good people, and this town has a warm, neighborly spirit. They take care of the grandchildren with eagerness, and for their kindness, I am immensely thankful. It is for this reason that I proposed we live together. Since this is a rural area, they were struggling with a lack of help, so they were actually grateful for my offer. Every day is a battle against hard labor, but I don't find it burdensome. I see it as good exercise, and I enjoy living with them. Except for one thing.
Hey, could you stop standing at the entrance? You're in the way.
Oh, Helen. I'm sorry.
You're really an eyesore. Why did Cody ever marry a woman like you?
Complaining as she walked into the house was my sister-in-law, Helen White, 55 years old. She originally worked in the city, but she married the son of her boss and returned to the countryside. Helen's husband, Greg, seems to be quite successful and often travels for work. Using that as an excuse, she insisted on living here. I find her incredibly difficult, and she often treats me terribly. There was a moment when the request from my mother-in-law to run an errand truly resonated with me.
She's really useless, you know. I'm so worried about Mom that I can't even live with my husband at our house.
I saw Helen chatting with some neighborhood ladies. Not understanding the conversation, I thought I should at least say hello, so I approached them.
Oh, she's here. Sorry, let's talk again later.
Helen glared at me as if I were a nuisance. It bothered me a little, but I didn't realize it at the time and greeted her anyway.
Helen, hello. Are you out for a walk today?
That's none of your business. More importantly, when are you leaving this town?
What?
With a filthy woman like you in that house, even I get shunned by the neighbors. Just because you're the eldest son's wife, don't get too full of yourself.
No. I'm not acting like that at all.
I don't care about your opinion. I don't recognize you as part of the Sanders family.
She spat those words at me and then disappeared into her home. Not recalling anything I had done to make her hate me, I tried to figure out why this was happening. I discovered the reason when my mother-in-law asked me to run an errand. Apparently, she had told Helen that all of their inheritance would go to my husband and me after they passed away. Helen didn't like that at all. So she started harassing me to drive me out of the Sanders family. At its worst, she almost involved the neighbors, but thanks to my in-laws, things didn't escalate. This went on until one Christmas. Finally, Helen did something completely unexpected. That year, we welcomed an unusually cold Christmas. The temperature was 36 degrees Fahrenheit. When I exhaled, my breath turned white in the cold, and snow was falling that night. Every year, it was tradition for the Sanders family to gather together and show their faces for the holiday. On this day, my husband Cody had also come back home, and my in-laws seemed incredibly happy.
Are the grandkids working this year too?
Yes, they are doing well. They mentioned they would come to visit you once things calm down after the holidays.
I see. They're working hard.
My in-laws looked delighted to see him back home after a long time, and I watched the scene with a smile. As it got closer to dinner time, I headed to the kitchen to prepare the evening meal.
Hannah, I'm really sorry for all the trouble you go through with my parents. You must be tired from the farm work, right? I'll take over today so you can relax.
Cody noticed how busy I was and came to the kitchen to help.
Oh no, it's fine. Cody, you're the one who's always tired from work. You should relax when you're back home. I'll finish preparing the dinner.
That's right. Let Hannah do it. She likes doing chores anyway.
Helen poked her head into the kitchen, giving me a nasty smile as she spoke.
Hey, Hannah isn't a maid. That's not a nice thing to say.
Oh, sorry. I'm just the type of a person to say what I think.
It's fine with me.
See? Even Hannah says it's fine. Cody, you're just overthinking it. It's not good to spoil your wife too much, you know?
Helen laughed loudly as she left the kitchen. Cody was visibly shocked by her attitude.
What's up with Helen? Was she always like that?
Maybe she's just making a bad joke. Don't worry about it, Cody. Go have some drinks with your parents and wait for dinner.
I didn't want him to know how much Helen bullied me. I didn't want to worry him, and I didn't want the bullying to escalate if she found out he knew. His concern was enough for me.
If anything happens, you'll let me know, right?
Cody said as he left the kitchen. I pulled myself together and carried the pot to the living room.
After all, honey-baked ham is what Christmas is all about. Nothing beats a meal at home.
It's delicious because we're all eating together.
Exactly.
After we finished eating, we all gathered around the coffee table in the living room and enjoyed some drinks. Cody seemed relaxed, happily chatting with his parents. The wind outside was strong, and the creaking of the windows echoed through the hallway. Everyone was so engrossed in conversation that the noise didn't bother them. The night wore on, and it was past midnight when it happened.
Hannah, could you help me with something? Come over here.
Helen, who couldn't hold her liquor well, staggered as she called me out to the yard. It seemed like everyone else was pretty tipsy because no one noticed that I had been called away.
What's going on? Why are you calling me out to the porch? Is there something you need?
I followed her as she asked, but there was nothing in the yard, and it didn't look like there was anything that needed help. I had a bad feeling, but I shook my head, thinking I was just overreacting. Just as I was about to ask what she needed, she suddenly opened the window, letting in the cold wind and snow.
Having someone else around during family time is just a nuisance.
For some reason, she shoved me into the yard.
Ouch! What are you doing?
Useless people should just freeze in the yard. Take a moment to reflect on your thick nerves.
With those words, I was thrown out into the freezing night. The wind was strong, and it was already past midnight. Without any warm clothing, I quickly started to feel the cold.
Helen, please open the door. I'm begging you.
I banged on the window, pleading, but Helen was already gone. The locked window didn't budge, and the cold air was sapping my body heat. The wind was particularly strong that night, and no matter how much I shouted, my voice didn't reach anyone in the living room. I thought about going around to the front door and ringing the bell. Then I remembered the doorbell was broken and quickly gave up on that idea. I had to find a way to keep warm. Hugging my shivering body, I moved to the corner of the yard. Scanning the area for something to shield against the wind, I observed the garden trees cultivated by my father-in-law as a pastime. I immediately took shelter behind the trees and started rubbing my arms to keep warm. I thought about breaking the window to get inside, but why should I have to go through this? As that thought crossed my mind, tears began to flow uncontrollably. Everything I had been holding back suddenly came flooding out, and I just kept crying in that spot. Even though I was sobbing and crying out, no one could hear me. The thought that no one would notice made the tears flow even more. It was so painful, I wanted to disappear. Why was this happening to me? I hadn't done anything wrong. All I wanted was to enjoy living happily with my family. I felt like these dark emotions were taking over my heart. I had been pretending to be okay for so long, but I had reached my limit. I couldn't forgive Helen. I couldn't stand her for putting me through this. I wanted her to feel even more pain than I did. It was at that moment that I heard a voice.
Excuse me, is anyone there?
A voice suddenly called out from near the entrance to the yard. Startled, I let out a sound, and there stood Helen's husband, Greg.
Hannah, what are you doing out there?
Seeing me in such a disheveled state, he quickly took off his coat and draped it over me. The warmth of the coat brought me instant relief, and I began to cry uncontrollably like a child. He seemed confused by the suddenness of it all, but he couldn't leave me sobbing like that, so he hugged me and gently rubbed my back.
It's okay. You're safe now. Just take your time and calm down.
He repeated those words over and over, staying with me until I finally calmed down. Once I had finished crying and regained my composure, I pulled away and apologized to him.
I'm sorry for showing you such an embarrassing scene.
Not at all. But what happened?
The kindness in his smile as he reassured me made me feel like I could confide in him, but then I quickly remembered that he was Helen's husband. Who would believe that his own wife could do something like this? To him, Helen was someone he cherished. If I told him what happened, it might just make things worse for me. As I was lost in thought, he said something that shocked me.
Did Helen do this to you?
I couldn't hide my surprise at his blunt question. It must have shown on my face because he sighed deeply, looking troubled.
I had a feeling.
Why do you think it was Helen?
Let's go to my car for now. We don't know when she might come back out here.
With that, Greg quickly headed toward his car. I followed him as instructed and got into the passenger seat.
Why do you think it was Helen?
Feeling the warmth return to my body from the car's heater, I turned to him with a question.
Based on her past behavior, my suspicions were strong. Moreover, I can't envision our in-laws engaging in such actions, and Cody truly values you. It's inconceivable that he would do something like this to you.
His deductive reasoning, almost like that of a detective, surprised me once again.
Can you tell me what happened? At the very least, know that I'm not your enemy.
Seeing how genuinely concerned he was, I slowly began to share everything that had happened. When I finished recounting the events of the day, Greg seemed to make a firm decision, staring ahead with a resolute expression.
This is unacceptable, inhuman. I can't understand how anyone could do something like that.
His face was filled with anger, and his voice had a harsh edge to it.
Hannah, we need to tell our in-laws about this.
What?
To clarify, may I be the one to inform them? By explaining the situation and sharing your perspective, perhaps they will reconsider their opinion of her.
Just as we were discussing this, his phone rang.
Hello.
For some reason, he put the call on speakerphone.
Greg, have you seen Hannah?
Cody's voice came through the other end, frantic, filling the car with urgency.
Hannah's gone. I asked Helen, and she said maybe Hannah went out shopping or something, but it's the middle of the night. She left everything behind her coat, wallet, phone, everything.
Cody, calm down.
Mom and Dad are about to go out and start looking for her. They're thinking of calling the neighbors to help search too.
He seemed to be in a panic, and it didn't seem like Greg's words were getting through to him. Even though it wasn't the right time to be thinking about it, I felt an overwhelming sense of love for Cody.
Cody, please calm down. I'm safe. I'm with Greg.
Hannah, what's going on? Are you okay?
Hearing my voice, Cody was both surprised and relieved, which brought tears to my eyes again.
I'm okay. Please tell Mom and Dad that I'm fine.
Where were you? I was so worried. I'm just glad you're safe.
His voice, filled with relief, sounded as if he was speaking to a lost child who had just been found. There was a hint of frustration in his words, likely from the worry.
Shall we go inside?
After ending the call, I handed Greg back his coat, and we both headed toward the front door.
Hannah, where were you?
Sorry, Cody.
I said with a smile, touched by how deeply concerned he had been. He looked like he was about to scold me for smiling, but my mother-in-law quickly spoke up.
Hannah, why did you go outside dressed like that? What if you catch a cold? Get inside, quick.
Even though she sounded angry, there was a warmth in her voice that reminded me of my own mother. I felt both guilty and happy at the same time. As I was about to go inside with Cody, Greg spoke up.
Mom, where is Helen?
Oh, Greg, it's you. Helen? She passed out in the family room from drinking too much. Honestly, I'm ashamed of her. I can't deal with it.
Clearly exasperated, my mother-in-law was on the verge of walking away when Cody intervened.
I'm sorry, but could you ask Dad to join us in the living room? There's something we need to discuss, and I'd like everyone except Helen to be there.
Oh? All right then. Just wait a moment. Honey!
Sensing the seriousness in Greg's voice, my mother-in-law immediately went to fetch my father-in-law. The three of us went ahead to the living room, preparing the room and the heater while we waited for them.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Dad was already asleep.
I drank too much.
My father-in-law added with a sheepish laugh. Greg gave him a gentle smile.
It's all right. Sorry for waking you.
No worries. So, what's this about?
As my father-in-law's laughing face turned serious, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy.
The truth is, the reason Hannah was outside is that Helen threw her out.
What?
Is that true, Hannah?
Both my mother-in-law and Cody were shocked by the sudden revelation. My father-in-law remained silent, listening intently to Greg's explanation.
When I got home, I heard crying from the yard. When I went to check, I found Hannah crying behind the garden trees.
What? Hannah, did Helen really do that to you?
My heart ached as I saw the shock and disbelief on my mother-in-law's face. It was understandable. What parents could ever imagine their own child doing something like that? Just as I thought that, my mother-in-law grasped my hand.
Hannah, if this really happened, please tell me. I'm on your side. If you say it, we'll believe you.
I looked up at her in surprise at her unexpected words.
As a parent, this might make me a failure, but we're truly grateful to you more than words can express. Who would doubt what you say? If anyone does, I won't forgive them. So please, tell us. I want to hear it from you.
In that moment, everything clicked into place. I realized that my in-laws had been aware all along. They knew I had been enduring Helen's harassment. However, without any proof, they couldn't do anything. I understood then that it had been hard on them too. They had been waiting for me to ask for help.
The truth is, Helen has been harassing me for a long time. Today, she suddenly called me out to the porch and she told me to freeze in the yard because I'm useless, and then she pushed me and locked me out.
As soon as I finished speaking, my mother-in-law pulled me into a strong embrace.
I'm so sorry. My daughter has treated you so horribly. I'm truly sorry.
Mom!
It must have been so hard. You've done so well. It's okay now.
My mother-in-law and I cried together, sobbing uncontrollably. By the time we had finished, my eyes were swollen and heavy.
So, Greg, what was it you wanted to talk about?
Once we had calmed down, my father-in-law, wearing a serious expression, addressed Greg.
We should discuss this with Helen present. It's important for her as well.
With that, Greg led everyone to the living room. As soon as we entered, we were greeted by the sight of Helen in a disgraceful state. Helen was snoring and sprawled out on the sofa, a bottle of vodka in one hand. The sight was so pitiful that everyone let out a sigh.
Helen, wake up.
Greg's voice was cold, and he shook her with a tone I had never heard before.
What? I was sleeping so well.
Helen grumbled as she sat up, scratching her head and glaring at him.
Helen, we need to talk.
What? Does it have to be right now? I have a headache.
Her attitude made it clear she found this conversation a nuisance, but Greg silently slapped a piece of paper onto the table.
What's this?
The paper he slammed onto the table was divorce papers.
Helen, let's end this.
What? Wait, what's going on all of a sudden?
Helen's face turned pale, as if her drunkenness and sleepiness had vanished. Greg responded to her trembling question in a calm and steady voice.
I want a divorce. I'm done with you.
What? Why are you suddenly asking for a divorce?
Why? Don't tell me you have no idea why.
What do you mean?
Do I really need to spell it out for you?
With that, he spread several photos across the table. The photos showed Helen dressed in designer clothes, arm in arm with an unfamiliar man, entering a hotel.
What?
What are these?
My mother-in-law couldn't hide her shock either as she looked at the photos. Greg pressed on.
Did you think I wouldn't notice your affair? It seems you also used my credit card without permission to buy those designer items.
Wait! Please, just don't divorce me.
It's too late. I also know about your gambling addiction and the debts you've racked up.
Gambling?
Next, Greg laid out several IOUs on the table.
You've gone too far to be saved.
No! Please, Greg. I won't cheat again. Just don't divorce me.
In a moment of desperation, Helen reached for the hem of Greg's clothes. That's when my father-in-law, who had remained quiet until that point, sprang into action, seized her arm, and pulled her to her feet.
Dad, what are you doing? Let go of me.
Helen screamed in pain, struggling as my father-in-law dragged her to the porch and threw her out into the yard. Caught off guard, she lost her balance and fell to the ground.
What are you doing? That hurt.
Get out.
What?
You're no longer a member of the Sanders family.
His voice was loud and furious, leaving her stunned and speechless. His back trembled with anger, and his clenched fists were so tight that his nails seemed to dig into his palms.
It's shameful that you've turned out to be such a disgrace. I'm ashamed.
Dad, please, wait.
Don't ever call me dad again. I never want to see your face again.
With those cold words, he walked away from the porch. Helen scrambled to her feet and tried to chase after him, but my mother-in-law stepped in to block her path.
Mom! I'm sorry. I'll change. Please, just let me come back home.
Our only daughter is Hannah. I don't know you.
With those chilling words, she slammed the porch window shut and locked it. Helen, now literally locked out, screamed and shouted in the yard, but within a few minutes, she was gone. She was outside in this freezing weather, wearing barely anything. She must have run out of energy to keep shouting pretty quickly. I started to worry if she'd be all right, but Cody pulled me close, brushing away my concerns.
Helen did something unforgivable. She's facing the consequences. You don't need to worry about her.
With that, he led me back to the living room. That's when we started a family meeting. My in-laws were offering apologies to Greg and me for Helen's actions. Both of us told them it wasn't their fault, but they insisted repeatedly, asking to make amends somehow.
Then please continue to cherish Hannah from now on. Also, would it be okay if I still visit here sometimes? I can't forgive Helen, but I care deeply about you both. So please, let me remain as your son.
His words brought tears to my in-laws' eyes. The next day, Cody looked out into the yard from the porch. He saw Helen had built a little igloo, desperately trying to warm her freezing body. When she noticed him, she tried saying something, but he didn't bother listening. Thus, she was effectively disowned by the family. Later on, she got divorced. I heard she's struggling to pay off her debts. Greg still drops by from time to time, and every Christmas, Helen's pathetic antics become our favorite topic over drinks. Even though she tried visiting a few times after that, the neighbors would give her cold stares and spread rumors, eventually driving her out of town. They say what goes around comes around, and seeing it happen firsthand did lift my spirits a bit, though that's just between us.